And howdy, y'all, and welcome back to another beautiful day of mathematics learning. Here we go with lesson 10A4B, whatever that means, chapter 11, lesson 3 in the textbook. Today we're going to talk surface area, but before we get into surface area, let's go ahead and pause. Take a look at assignment 23. Come on back when you're ready. You all know I love questions. Bring some questions, please, and let's go. What are we doing today? An important part is distinguishing, there's the action word, between surface area and volume. Understand what you are measuring. Are you wrapping a figure with wrapping paper? Okay, then you need squares of wrapping paper. You're looking for square units. Are you instead filling a figure, a present with, I don't know, cubes of foam, whatever the case might be? So we're looking at surface area versus volume, and then of course we are going to find surface area. We'll start off today with rectangular prisms. And let's go. I wish I had you in class right now because we'd be doing something with some cutting and some nets, but more on that as we get through. If you want to, pause, fill this paper out. The worksheet is not enough space to write work. Come on back when you're ready. So we were going to have some partner talk. Question, I would encourage you when I finish to pause and think about this. What is surface area? What do you think it is? What are we finding when you calculate it? How do you think you find the surface area of a rectangular prism? Pause and come on back when you're ready. So that's where we're heading, ladies and gents. We're focused on rectangular prisms. And I'm going to leave you with a few more questions. Could you figure out the area of each rectangle if you knew the exact units? Might not be inches, might not be centimeters, but could you figure it out? And how can you use those areas to find the surface area of Mr. Callan? That would be obvious. Find each area, add them together. Now, what I would leave you with before we get to the next page, what do you notice about those rectangles? Think about it. All right, so here we go with, we're going to be asked to first draw a net of a rectangular prism. These are the dimensions, but what is a net? Well, imagine taking some scissors and literally cutting up this figure so that it unpeels like you unpeel an orange, right? This, ladies and gents, is what you would have. Yes, but what would the dimensions be? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to color that 8 blue, and I'm going to say if that's 8, then so is that, and so is that, and of course, that backside is 8 as well, but we don't need that. How about I do the red 4, which means this is a 4, and of course, off to the other side, the edges. But I'm going to erase that since that's in the back. And then how about that green 10, which means this up here is 10, and naturally that over there is 10, and of course the backside as well, but I'm going to get rid of that. All right, so why, Mr. Callan, are you doing this? Well, I want you to picture one figure at a time. I'm going to try to do this without totally messing this up. Just look at that front rectangle. Yeah, I figured I'd want to box that in and zoom it in for you, but we don't need that to box in for us. Hey, look at that. 8 by 10 is what it appears to be. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw this like that's our main thing. There's an 8 by a 10. Now, as you can already see, if this edge is, well, all right, let's just keep going, shall we? But you guessed it, that each one of those edges is also going to be 10. And naturally, what does that mean in terms of, we'll come back to the area of each figure. Let's go ahead and continue on with the dimensions. So let's look at the other 10 by whatever rectangle. And if you can see, let me go ahead and just zoom in or actually focus in on that area. If you look at the top rectangle, it appears to be a 4 by 10 rectangle. If you look at the bottom rectangle, just kind of magnify your eyes, zoom in your eyes, focus your eyes on that. Another 10 by 4. Probably aren't too surprised by that. But how about those side faces? So if we look at the right, it's going to be the same as the left. Focus on that, and you see an 8 by a 4. Naturally, if that's the 8, then that's the 4. After all, that should fold onto that. That should fold onto that. It better be the same width. And of course, that would mean that this rectangle over here is also 8 by 4. Now, by now you're seeing some patterns. First of all, you notice the right rectangle is the same as the left, and they are apparently opposite of each other. Also, the top and the bottom faces are the same. Let's just go into each, shall we? 4 by 8, 32. Square units, square centimeters for those. The top is a 4 by 10 or a 40 square centimeters, but I suppose that means the bottom 4 by 10 will also be 40 centimeters. Meanwhile, 8 by 10, 80 square centimeters on the front and the back, and it will be no surprise to you that we will go ahead and add up 40 and 40, and 80 and 80, and 32 and 32. Final answer is going to be 304 square centimeters. Okay, Mr. Callan, do we always have to use a net? Look very carefully, and let's break this down backwards. We have two 40s, we have two 80s, we have two 32s. Where did those two 40s come from? Well, of course, that was the 4 by 10 rectangles. Where did the two 80s come from? Well, that would be the 8 by 10 rectangles. And where did the two 32s come from? Two sets of 4 times 8. But what's interesting here, 4 by 10 you could call the length by the width. 8 by 10 you could call the length by the height. 2 by 10 you could call the width by the height. And notice, because we have two sets of everything, you could just pull that 2 outside, as we've talked about in the past with distribution. Ladies and gents, this is what I'm going to talk about on the next slide, the formula to find any rectangular prism surface area. So again, let's say you didn't just do that with the nets. I will advise you very strongly to set up something and title it or identify it as the length. So for instance, anywhere I see a L, I'm now going to write a 10. And anywhere I see, I'm probably using the wrong color, sorry about that. Anywhere I see a W, I'm going to determine that 4 is the width. So anywhere I see a W, I'm going to write a 4. And last but not least, anywhere I see an 8, I'm going to call that the height. So anywhere I see an H, we're going to substitute an 8. And again, pretending that you didn't just do this problem, that means we have 40 and 80 and 32. And if you add those up and then multiply it by 2, because after all, little disappearing ink here, every one of those rectangles is doubled. If there's a front face, there's a back face. If there's a top, there's a bottom. If there's a right, there's a left. Every one of those is doubled. And naturally, I could sit here and add up 40, 80 is 120 plus 32, 152, double that, and that whoop, is the same thing that we just said. Ta-da! So, while I would say that a strong student can do the formula, students with the strongest skills can do both the formula as well as perhaps the more necessary skill of finding nets, because there's not always a formula for every shape out there on this planet. So, drawing a net is going to be the more handy or important skill. Using a formula, I know everybody can substitute in numbers. Go ahead and pause, reflect. What is a net? How do you find the surface area of any prism that does not have a formula? Come on back when you're ready. So think about this. Let's call this a triangular prism. Picture what that net is. Remember what we've talked about, how there are two bases, top and bottom, and then a whole bunch of rectangles. So if you peeled this rectangle apart, this prism apart, excuse me, you would then find three rectangles, front left, front right, and back, in the back. And then you guessed it, two bases. So now you could use whatever dimensions those are and find each individual area and add them together. Thus, a net is a more important skill because some shapes simply won't have a formula. All right, head to the assignment, folks. Let me know if you have any questions. Do well and let's grow.